Story 1. The Swing. What do people usually fear in moving out to live on their own? What sort of problems does one normally encounter in finally venturing from the safety of their parents' home into a place of their own? Perhaps it's paying their rent on time, or having to do all the cleaning without any of Mommy's help. These were things I anticipated. I never could have predicted the events of the past week. We had finally moved the last box into my new house, single-level ranch, and only 2 bedrooms, but for a bachelor like me, it was a dream come true. The house was right in the heart of a great suburban neighborhood, with a 2-car driveway and a pretty big backyard. When I had seen the yard, the first thing I thought of was all the parties I'd be hosting. I stepped onto the deck and took a breath of the fresh air, closing my eyes to imagine the endless nights of friends, booze, and, of course, women. I stretched my arms out and let out an exuberant sigh of relief. As I scanned my surroundings, I couldn't help but notice the elevated deck gave me the proper vantage point to see into my neighbors' backyards. I figured, since I hadn't formally met any of them yet, I would try and guess now whom I'd have to worry about if my parties got too rowdy, and the risk of 911 calls would become a harsh reality. To my right, I saw a vibrant garden, a grill and hammock. I figure it was a middle-aged couple. Hopefully they're not too old and cranky, I thought to myself as I turned my head to view my neighbors to the left. That's when I saw him. Under a large oak tree, adorned in colorful Christmas lights, was what looked to be a young boy swinging away on his play set. Great, I thought. I bet his bedtime is a lot earlier than any party I throw would be ending. I continued to look at the boy. His back was turned to me. He wore a hoodie and gloves, which struck me as odd, since it was summer and pretty warm outside. I brushed it off and assumed the boy was sick. I went back inside and began to unpack everything. With the help of some friends, we managed to put together all my furniture, hook up my entertainment system, and more or less get the house in working order. I just sent out the texts, guys. Get ready to party tonight, I exclaimed as I leapt off the couch and finished my beer. The guys all began to cheer, and a round of high-fives were exchanged. By now the sun was setting, as it had been several hours since we first had brought in all my belongings. My friend Dan was unpacking one of the last boxes as he eagerly looked out of the window. Have you met your neighbors yet? Any fine young ladies gonna be coming around here asking to borrow some sugar? He asked in a sarcastic tone as he turned to me with a lewd gesture. Smiling and walking over, I reply, Nope, not yet, but I don't think I'll have much luck in that department. From the looks of it, it's just a bunch of normal families. One of them even has a kid. As I pointed to the house I had seen earlier, my face scrunched to show a look of confusion and surprise. The boy I had seen swinging earlier was still there. He was still swinging under the ambience of the lit-up tree. Weird, that kid was swinging when we first got here too, I said to Dan as he looked at his phone. Barely acknowledging my comment, he raised his hand up and mumbled, must be a special ed kid or something. He walked off, calling more people to invite them to the housewarming party. I turned back to the swinging boy. He couldn't have been swinging this whole time, could he? That night, as planned, we had my housewarming party. It was such a great time. I greeted my friends and cousins as they arrived, handing them all the beverage of their choice. We were outside until around 3 or 4 in the morning, and the weather suddenly got cool and it began to drizzle. I would have been willing to stick it out until it passed, but the girls all began to freak out, claiming their hair would frizz, and all ran inside. Naturally, the guys followed, holding makeshift umbrellas over the girls' heads. I laughed to myself at how hard they were trying to get lucky. I took the opportunity to quickly clean up some of the trash that had accumulated before going inside. I scooped up a bunch of cans and bottles before I turned around and was left in awe. I guess we were all distracted by the music and alcohol to notice earlier. But now, with everyone inside, I saw it. The boy was still outside and on his swing. He was still in the same position and outfit I had seen in him all day, back turned to me, wearing the same hoodie and gloves. I stood there for a minute, lost in thought, when from behind me I heard a loud, "Hiya, neighbor." I jumped and did a quick 180, dropping the trash I had been carrying. "Whoa, sorry about that, bud. Didn't mean to startle ya," laughed an elderly man. He was wearing pajamas and slippers as he held his hand out, waiting for a shake on my end. "Oh, hello, sir," I said as I cleared my throat and shook his hand, recollecting my thoughts. He smiled and began to fumble with his hands. "I hate to be that guy, especially since you just moved in and everything. But you think you guys can turn down the music a bit? The wife and I are pretty light sleepers, and at this age, we tend to be early risers," he said bashfully. I smiled and laughed as I put a hand to my face in embarrassment. "Oh, geez, I'm sorry, sir. I guess things got a little crazier than planned. I didn't think people would stick around this long. I really did feel bad. I half expected the man to come out yelling, demanding us to keep it down, lest he called the cops. His gentle demeanor was refreshing, and I was more than happy to oblige. I laughed and replied, "I'll go let everyone know they need to stay inside and take it down a notch. I'm Peter, by the way." I shook his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Peter." "I'm Paul," he said with a grin. As he smiled, his eyes drifted past mine and towards the swinging boy. "I assume you've noticed the Langer's kid by now, huh?" asked Paul, as he cupped his hands and breathed in to try and keep warm. "Yeah," I said as I turned to face him. "What's the deal with him?" "He's been on that thing all day." Paul shrugged, not sure. "No one really knows the story. He just swings and swings until eventually—" Paul stopped and his eyes widened. "Wait. It's happening. Check it out." I turned my around to find the boy had stopped swinging. He sat completely still for a moment before slowly rising from the rubber seat of the swing. He began to shake violently, falling to his knees and scraping the dirt below him. Even from where we were standing, we were able to hear his quick bursts of shrieking and gurgling. I became concerned. Was the boy okay? It looked like he was having an asthma attack or a seizure. I started to run to the boy in order to help, but stopped after a couple steps. His mother had run out. I looked at her, completely sober now from the adrenaline that was pumping through my body. It was not a pleasant sight. She was a frail, haggard woman with a gray, knotted mane of hair on her head. Her skin was pale and her eyes had dark bags underneath. It looked as if she hadn't slept or had a proper meal for ages. Mrs. Langer rushed out quick, holding a small orange bottle, the kind one would receive from a pharmacist. After she reached her boy, she knelt down and poured several white pills into her hand. Before she could even finish offering the pills to her son, He had grabbed her arm and buried his face into the palm of her hand, inhaling the pills. Mrs. Langer pulled away and began to rub her wrist. It appeared the boy had hurt her, which did not really surprise me due to how skinny the woman was. Paul and I watched intensely without uttering a single word. After a moment or two, the boy simply rose back to his feet, sat back down on his swing, and resumed his leisurely activity. Mrs. Langer grabbed the nappy orange bottle and proceeded back inside, still clutching her wrist. Paul and I were both shaken up. We had no idea what we had just seen. Wow, I've seen the boy spuzz out before, but never that bad. I bet whatever condition he has is getting more severe. Poor kid, Paul said as he rubbed the back of his head. What exactly is wrong with him? I asked, with my eyes still glued to the child. Like I said, I don't know. No one around here does, Paul replied, turning around and walking back his door. Anyway, my wife is probably getting worried. You have a good night, Peter. Yeah, I sighed, arranging my thoughts. Nice meeting you, Paul. We both exchanged a final wave and returned to our respective households. The party was dying down when I entered, and I was glad. What I had just seen took a lot out of me. The next morning I felt like shit. The copious waves of alcohol I had carelessly consumed the night prior had finally caught up to me. My head throbbed, and I was severely parched. I stood up, and the arid sensation in my mouth and throat was quickly replaced by feelings of nausea. I shambled to the bathroom and dropped to my knees, clutching the porcelain for dear life. At least I have the day off to recover, I thought to myself. I grabbed the sports drink I had strategically placed in the bathroom the day before in anticipation for my hangover, and chugged it down in only a few gulps. I was no stranger to this feeling, and I knew what to expect. Within a couple minutes I began to vomit and immediately felt better, though not enough to have a very productive day. I mentally prepared myself for a day of movies, video games, and junk food. After a couple hours of lying in my borderline vegetative state, I heard the mailman make his stop at my door. In no mood to get off the couch, I ignored it and continued binge watching the zombie show everyone was raving about. It probably was not the best idea to be observing such grotesque gore, while it felt as if a war was being waged in my stomach. I sucked it up and continued to watch. Several episodes later, I made my way to the kitchen and popped in a giant TV dinner in the microwave. While it cooked, I decided I would bring in the mail from earlier. I unlocked the front door and let in some much-needed fresh air. I stood at the door and scooped up the contents of my mailbox, sifting through the junk mail and bills, when I saw I had received a package. Without scanning the box for more details, I brought the small box inside and cut off the tape. I opened it only to find a small orange bottle, like the one I had seen my neighbor holding last night. I was puzzled and searched for the mailing label on the box. The mailman had delivered it to the wrong house. Annoyed, I let out a big sigh. I was not in the mood to get dressed and leave the house for anything, let alone to awkwardly meet new neighbors in order to tell them I have the pills for their weirdo son. I looked out of my back window and saw the boy was swinging away, as usual. I heard my microwave go off, indicating my food was ready. With one last glance at the child, I told myself the pills can wait, as the boy had scarfed down several the night before. I tossed the bottle of pills aside and made my way to the kitchen. After eating, I felt fatigued, which caused me to fall asleep on the couch. I woke up from my sleep to sound of commotion outside my home. The repetitive beeping of a large vehicle in reverse echoed through my brain. Nightfall had arrived, and my house was engulfed in almost absolute darkness. The only light I could see was the dull gray from my now idle television, and the swirl of red and blue illuminating through my windows. The scene that I woke to was almost surreal, and I thought for a moment that I was dreaming. I got on my feet and looked through my front window. A crowd had gathered on my front lawn. They were facing the ambulance that was parked in the driveway of my Langer house. I threw on a light coat to hide my stained, most likely rancid-smelling shirt I had been stewing in all day. In the crowd, Paul stood amongst several other people whom I presumed to be residents of the neighborhood. "Hey, Paul," I blurted as I cleared the phlegm from my throat. "What the hell is going on?" With his eyes still glued to the scene that unfolded next door, he replied, "We're not exactly sure. We think something may have happened to someone in the house. Mr. Langer is speaking with one of the paramedics, and he looks panicked." I saw the man Paul was referring to. Like his wife, Mr. Langer also looked as if his body was depleted and barren. He wore a loose tank top that showed just how skinny he was. His ribs poked through the pale, tight skin on his torso. He was pacing around frantically, covering his eyes and mumbling something to himself. I was still gazing at the distraught man when the soft murmuring of the crowd around me erupted into a frenzy of screams and cries. I turned to the door of the Langer house, and dread began to fill my body. Two policemen exited the house, followed by a paramedic who wheeled out a gurney. Atop of the gurney was the blooded body of the seemingly lifeless Mrs. Langer. From where we were standing, we were able to see the pale, bruised wrist of the poor woman hanging from the side, blood running down and dripping from her fingertips. It began to twitch, and her head bobbed around as the paramedic pressed an oxygen mask to her face and hoisted the gurney into the back of the ambulance. I turned to Paul, who was standing on the tip of his feet in order to see over the crowd. One of the policemen made his way over to our now frantic group of screaming men and women, ordering us to disperse and return to our homes. Everyone began to bombard the officer with questions, asking what happened and if they were safe. "You have nothing to worry about, people. It appears a group of coyotes attacked Mrs. Langer in her backyard. We have since located and neutralized the animals," remarked the officer, avoiding eye contact with anyone before him. It was clear he was lying through his teeth. I raised my hand and shouted above the crowd, "And what about the boy? Was he hurt?" The officer shot me a look of irritation as he cleared his throat and hesitantly announced, "He was not anywhere near the scene of the attack. We assume he got scared and ran away for safety, and we're in the process of locating the child. If anyone sees him, please call 911 immediately." With that, the officer turned his back to the less than satisfied crowd and almost ran back to his cruiser. I turned to Paul, who bared a look of dismay. He turned and shot me an apathetic smile before patting me on the back and making his way inside. I stood there for a moment after the crowd slowly disbanded. Was this my fault? Did it have something to do with the pills? I quickly disregarded the paranoid thoughts that plagued my mind and walked back to my home. I slid through the front door that I had carelessly left ajar and shut if behind me as I slid down and cupped my hands around my head. There was a legion of emotions coursing through me as I pondered my next move. I knew I had to get the pills out of my house, though the chances were slim. I did not want any blame being directed at me for not returning the pills sooner. Hell, I knew I had committed at least one federal crime when I unknowingly opened someone else's mail. I decided I would anonymously place the box of pills in the Langer's mailbox and dash back inside. I grabbed the pill from my couch and glanced out of the back window. The Christmas lights in the oak tree were bright as ever, illuminating the grisly crime scene that lied just below. Blood and ripped clothing veiled the ground. That's when I saw them. The beau's gloves and hoodie were lying amidst the carnage. My heart sank. I was sure the beau was dead, or at the very least, critically injured. Tears began to fill my eyes as I banged my fists on the windowsill. The sudden burst of sound emanated throughout my home. I hadn't made a peep since I entered. The sudden contrast in sound made the shameful silence that followed even more noticeable. In the midst of the grim silence, I heard it, the low, spine-tingling gurgle that flowed from my bedroom. I froze, barely breathing. I listened keenly for another sound. To my dismay, I heard it again, another disgusting gurgle, now louder and fiercer, almost like a growl. The lights in my home were still all off, aside from the weak aura that radiated from the idle television. I was frozen still. My body rebelled against my mind's desire to move. Instinct began to kick in as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and fight or flight became a quick reality. I did not know what was in my house. All I knew was I definitely was going to choose flight. I pulled out my phone and fumbled for the flashlight app as I took a step towards my back door. My eyes were glued to the short hallway that connected the main area of the house to my bedroom. That's when I saw it. A small creature began to crawl from the hallway. I could barely make out any of its features. It looked human, but on all fours. The way it moved was eerie and awkward. The appendages moved sloppily, and its head was to the ground. I heard the same terrifying gurgle from the creature and realized it was sniffing the floor. What happened next still fills me with dread when I look back. The flashlight app I had opened had finished loading up and powered on through the phone. The bright light pierced the darkness and lit up the monstrous figure. I felt sick. Do you ever get the feeling in the middle of a nightmare where you start to suspect you aren't in reality and you are begging yourself to wake up? That desperate feeling of despair coursed through every fiber of my being. In front of me stood the Langer boy. Without all the layers of clothing he usually wore, I was able to see him for what he really was. This was not a normal child. His skin was tattered and worn out. Wrinkles and scars embellished his body. He slowly raised his head to the source of the light. Our eyes met. His eyes were worst part. However intense the darkness around his mother's eyes were, they could not compete with the beau's. The black around his peepers only worked to showcase his dilated pupils and the unnatural color of the irises. I might as well have been made of stone. All my ability to move had completely ceased. I could only stand there and watch the situation unfold before me. The boy slowly turned his body in my direction and began to take steps closer and closer. He left bloody prints where his hands met with the wood grain of my floor. It was not long till he was less than a foot from me. For what seemed like an eternity, he did move. Neither of us did. My mind was warped in panic, and I thought I would pass out. Before I had the chance, the boy rose from his animal-like posture. He was now standing on his feet, arms dangling to his sides. His eyes peered into mine. I stared back, still paralyzed with fear. He began to sluggishly turn his focus from my eyes to my hand, the one that still clutched a bottle of the pills. As soon as he realized what I held, he broke the silence and let out a demonic shriek like that of a banshee. Only his mouth moved as his jaw dropped. This awoke me from my trance, and I fell down. Still facing the boy, he crouched so that his face met mine. His mouth was still agape, exposing his sharp, mangled teeth. The tiny razors still contained small shreds of what I assumed to be his mother's flesh. He stretched his arm towards me and unraveled his blood-stained hand. Instantly, I knew what he was after. My voice trembled. You want your pills, right? He continued to stare at me, unfazed by my question. I lifted up my hand and began to open the small orange bottle. With shaking hands, I poured several pills into the palm of the child. I waited for a minute. I did not know time could move so slowly. I just wanted him to leave. Eventually, the boy's mouth shut and curled into a faint smile. He turned and made his way to the back door. He shot one final glance over to me as he tiled his head back and consumed all the pills I had given him. With an audible gulp, he pushed open the door and wandered back to his sanctuary. I watched as the boy took a seat on his swing and began to sway forward and back like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I managed to shut the back door before collapsing on the ground. It's been a week since that night, and I've returned the pills as planned. Mrs. Langer is still in critical condition, and now her husband has taken over, feeding the mysterious pills to his son whenever he needs them. I was never questioned by anyone about what transpired that night. I did not report the incident. I plan to move out soon, maybe to an apartment in the city, where there are no yards or play sets. The nightmares and fear from that night have run rampant in my mind. My backyard is still a mess from the party. I have not dared to go back there in order to clean things up. This is due to the fact that, since that fearful night, the boy makes sure to swing facing my home. Whenever I even glance out of the window, I see his haunting eyes peering into mine as he smiles that horrid smile. The last I saw of the boy was his father coming out to give him another dose of the medication. Mr. Langer was down to his last bottle. That was 3 long nights ago. I am looking out of the window now to see what I expected to see, an empty swing. Story 2. The prisoners. Are you going to get a pint in, then? They've just called time. I didn't hear him at first. I was miles away playing on the gambling machine in the far corner of the pub. It caught my eye as I was leaving the toilets. I always did have a soft spot for them. To my left sat an old couple in the corner, talking about how crap telly is nowadays, and to my right a rather raucous group being quite vocal about how they lost the pub quiz, but won a pickled egg or cloth ears. They've just called time at the bar. I definitely heard him that time and replied, "All right, well, you cheeky get. In fact, you get them in now for your lippiness. Half of old Pacalier, please. Oh, and make it snappy. They've just called time at the bar, I think." As he toddled off to the bar, I chucked another quid into the machine, and this time I was sure I would get the jackpot. The bleeding thing had already had £4.50 out of. Emmy, we'd come to the quaint old fishing town once again at the beginning of November. By then it was classed as out of season and was cheaper. Besides that, there's always something much more magical about strolling down the old cobbled street on a crisp night before slipping into one of the historical public houses with a roaring fire, and many a rosy-cheeked reveler will return from the bar. "Here you go, my little chickadee. Have you actually even won out on that machine yet?" he asked. "Nope, not a sausage. You never know, though. Anyway, it's better than them shooting games you go on in the amusements. At least, I'm in for a chance of winning my money back. Let's hope your luck turns round soon then. Old Peculiar is off. Got you IPA." We finished our drinks and made our way back to the cottage we had rented for the week. As we exited the throng and warmth of the pub, the biting night air brought silence outside. It was my suggestion that we go for a short stroll down to the harbor. I stood at the edge and watched the glistening black liquid pull and push beneath me. The orange shimmer from street lighting danced upon it like fire. It cast my mind back to the warm glow of the pub, and I wanted to go back to the cottage now to view all this beauty from the other side of a window in a centrally heated room. As we walked back up the cobbled street, the darkened entrances between shops to old yards on either side of the street seemed to pass with increasing recurrence, and each one blacker than the last. Anyone or anything could have been lurking in those old alleyways, and as I tried not to think about it, I gripped hold of Will's arm even tighter. The more I tried to ignore scary thoughts, the more my mind dragged me back to all the traditional ghost stories in the local interest books that I enjoy reading well. In the daytime anyway. We passed the bottom of some steps that led up a cliff to a churchyard above, and I looked up expecting to see the silhouette of a gloomy figure high up on the cliff gazing down at me. There was, of course, no one there, at least no one I could see. I was freaking myself out now, although I never mentioned any of this to Will. All the time he was just rambling about how he wanted to inquire about a sea fishing trip tomorrow, which I think he got in his head from seeing a bloke in the pub that resembled a stereotypical fisherman. Further up the street we strode without incident, past the old smokehouse on the right-hand side and straight to our cottage. Thank God. It was warm within, and my legs ached from the cold outside. It was decided that tea and toast was in order. As we went upstairs to put those ridiculous superhero lounge pants on, I filled the kettle and set it boiling. As it rumbled and gurgled away, I stood there in a daydream thinking about the places and people we'd seen today. Please help us. I heard it clearly, and yet, as faint as a gentle breeze, the whisper seemed to drift lightly through my mind. It felt like more of a thought than a sound, and it scared me. I darted to the kitchen entrance and shouted, "Will, where are you?" "I'm still upstairs." Can't a lad have a dump in peace? Charming, I thought. I had to go sleep next to that room soon. The pig. Okay, just checking. Kettle's nearly boiled. The whisper surely must have been my imagination. I read somewhere that the human mind naturally tries to recognize something familiar out of disorder. The noise of the kettle must have caused me to hear a voice. It must have. Deciding to dish the toast, I hastily mashed the 2 mugs of tea, turned off the kitchen light, and danced out of the kitchen as if the darkness was something that could be evaded. Arriving upstairs, I vowed never to return to the kitchen until the morning. Will came back downstairs, and we watched a bit of inane late-night television while we finished off our tea. All the while, "Please help us" played again, and again in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about it. We finished our drinks and headed off to bed. It had been a long day, and I'd hoped for a good night's sleep. This never seemed to happen until the last night of the holiday, though. I awoke suddenly, as I had done the previous night. My mouth was dry and rough, and I needed a drink of water. It must be the alcohol, I told myself. That and the fact of getting used to a different bed and different surroundings. I looked at my phone. The instant brightness seemed to sting my eyes. It read to 34. I lay there for a while pondering if I really needed that drink of water, as the prospect of traversing the floors of a strange old house by myself in the dead of night whilst already thinking about spooky goings-on felt rather daunting. "Come on, girl," I said to myself, "grow a pair and get on with it." I gathered up my courage and slipped out of bed, being careful not to wake Will, although not as careful as I could have been, as the company would have been nice. As I stumbled down the stairs, the floor felt unnaturally cold. The heating must have been off for a while now, I thought. You know, these holiday cottages, the central heating can sometimes be something that can't be understood or reasoned with. I reached the bottom of the stairs leading to the kitchen, and as I came round the corner, I saw her just stood there staring back at me. Her face was pale and soft as freshly driven snow, and her long dark hair looked like snakes falling from her shoulders. The eyes, oh God, the eyes, like to spheres of wispy jet. They seemed to absorb the light from her face like black holes. I screamed and jumped back in terror. So did she, coming to the embarrassing realization that the specter was actually just my reflection in the full-length mirror next to the downstairs bathroom. I continued to the kitchen, if a little shaken up. The kitchen sink was situated right in front of a window that faced out down the old cobbled street, back towards the steps at the base of the cliff up to the churchyard. The first floor where the kitchen was situated was higher than the street level, so you could get quite a good view of the passers-by below. The orange glow of the lighting gave definition. Each of the cobbles and the street resembled the back of a giant snake that tapered off into the distance. I stood there a while in the silence, wondering if I could see silhouettes in the distance where the gaps in the street lamps gave way to shadows. I turned the tap on, and the metallic gush startled me at first. I stood there waiting for the water to run colder, and was suddenly shocked as two figures emerged from beneath the window, heading down the street away from me. It was a woman and a little girl, both in some sort of period dress which appeared very smart and brightly colored despite the darkness. It looked like maybe Victorian dress. The girl skipped along happily next to the woman, who was holding up a dainty-looking parasol above her head at night. I could not believe what I was seeing. Why the hell would a woman and a little girl be out walking in the middle of the night? I found it very odd, but maybe they were here for the famous goth weekend. As they carried on, seemingly without a care in the world, I turned to the side and fumbled in the cupboard for a glass to quench my thirst, which seemed to intensify as I observed the odd couple. I turned back to the sink to fill my glass, and as I looked again down the street, they weren't there. They'd vanished. Even if they'd ran down the street, they wouldn't have made it to the end in that space of time. I stared hard at all the darkened nooks and crannies to see if maybe they were hiding and playing a trick on me or someone else that I hadn't seen. I filled the glass, turned off the tap, and waited for the sink to stop gurgling so it was silent again. I also turned off the kitchen light it would be difficult for them to see me that way, too. I waited a few minutes and heard nothing. Then a footstep outside the front door. I was sure it was a footstep. The front door was located just outside the kitchen entrance. Then I heard a little girl's voice, not clear enough to make out the words. Again I heard the voice, please. The rest was hard to make out. Please, something us. Please help us. Please help us. They must be in trouble. I unlocked the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened it, and there they both stood, the woman and the young girl. They both looked terrible, their clothes torn and filthy. What had happened to them in the short space of time I lost eyes on them? Then I noticed the terribly gruesome bruises the woman had around her neck. The young girl had cuts to her arm, and a small trickle of blood came from her right ear, like some sort of sick jewelry. Oh my God. Are you both okay? I squealed. The girl gripped my arm. The flesh of her hand felt cold and clammy. Please help us, she said in a croaky, almost ethereal voice. The woman began to weep gently, and as I turned to comfort her, the girl ran past me into the cottage. I turned and shouted, "Hey, hang on a sec." But her diminutive figure didn't stop as she disappeared up the stairs to the living room. I decided that I should probably let them both in then and at least make a hot drink and call the police. I turned back to the woman to find nothing. She had vanished. I ran out into the street to see if she had fled down it, but I could see no one. A black cat stopped halfway up the street and turned its gaze toward me. The two glowing orbs of its eyes seemed to pierce my soul. Still in disbelief that the woman had offloaded her daughter and made a quick getaway, I returned to the house. I closed the front door behind me and went up the stairs to the living room. The place felt freezing. The girl wasn't in the living room. Oh God, I thought. I hope she hasn't run upstairs and scared the crap out of Will. Sheepishly prancing up the stairs, I went up to the bedroom to see Will in bed, fast asleep, snoring away. Where the hell had she gone? I checked in the ensuite bathroom and the wardrobe, but could find no trace of her. I seriously thought I was losing it by now, and I went back downstairs to check behind the sofas. Nothing. I went down the second set of stairs, checked in the spare bedrooms, the bathroom, and the kitchen. Nothing. It was so surreal, and I was now feeling sick from shock. I had no choice but to go back to the bedroom and wake Will. Wake up. Something weird has just happened. He stirred. What's up? You okay? No, I'm not. The tears came flooding. I explained what had happened, and he agreed to get up and have a search about for me. I knew he thought I had lost the plot. I could see it all over his face. After looking all around the cottage and even out on the street, we found nothing. We went back inside and had a mug of tea and a chat about what happened. You've been under a lot of stress lately, what with work, and of course it's roughly a year since Jean passed away. Jean was my best friend who died in a car accident. I resented him for bringing that up, but he could have a point, so I just shrugged submissively, agreeing. He managed to persuade me to go back to bed, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. All I could think of was that if I closed my eyes, I would open them to see the little girl stood in the corner of the room staring back at me. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep. I awoke sharply. I panicked as I realized I was alone in bed, but then noticed the soft daylight pouring in through a gap in the curtains, like a waterfall of platinum. I could hear the tinkle of cups and the low rumbling of the kettle downstairs, and realized Will had got up and was pottering about. I checked my phone for the time, 14:34. I could not believe how late it was. I stumbled downstairs to the kitchen. Will was busying himself washing the pots. It was always like someone had made a four-course meal for 12 people when he made nothing more than a sandwich. "Good evening, Sleeping Beauty," he quipped. "Fancy a cuppa? Jesus, why didn't you wake me earlier?" I asked. His hilarious remarks continued. "That's Mr. Jesus to you, lass, and don't forget it. I just figured you could use the beauty sleep. You're not funny, mate. Yes, coffee would be wonderful. Cheers." "Any more woo things that go bump in the night?" he inquired, seemingly wanting a slap. "You bastard, that's not at all funny. It really freaked me out." "I'm sorry. That was a bridge too far. How do you feel?" "Not too bad. Once I fell asleep, I don't remember waking back up. I don't know. Maybe it was just a really vivid dream. I couldn't get the events out of my head, but I also didn't feel like I needed to see someone about it." "Do you want to call it short and get back home?" he asked. I actually felt like I did just want to go back home, or at least stay somewhere else. I knew he was just being polite, though, and it wouldn't be fair to ruin his holiday because of me. Nah, I'll just lay off the old peculiar from now on. "Who you heathen? Are you hungry anyway? Come on, get dressed, and we'll go get some fresh sea air and a bag of chips down on the front." It sounded good, so I got dressed and wrapped up, and off we went. Come nightfall, we found ourselves back in the warmth of the pub. It felt comforting to be surrounded by people. I was worried that maybe the drinking could have had an effect on me, causing what had happened the previous night, so I was sticking to soft drinks. Will wasn't, though. Apparently, it's against his religion to go to a pub and drink non-alcoholic drinks. "Chell, sorry, what?" I was miles away and didn't hear Will talking to me. When he said my name, it jolted me like an alarm clock. I asked if you wanted another drink. "Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Was just thinking. I'll have a tomato juice, please. Tomato juice, erg. Are you making a bolognese?" he joked. "Just go to the bar." "Pilek, yes, ma'am." He saluted as he got up and went to the bar. I just sat there looking round at all the people, noting how busy had got. All the tables were now full. Groups of men stood about holding their pint glasses up to their chests like microphones, each group seeming to take it in turns to laugh at the top of their voices. A gap appeared between two of the groups, and the vision that met me hit like an Arctic wind. The little girl stood there looking back at me, and everyone seemed oblivious to her. In the light, I saw her better now. Her clothes were muddy from head to toe, and the color made a stark contrast to her pale, almost gray face. I blinked, and she was gone again. I jumped up and made my way to where I saw her, but I couldn't see her anywhere. Could she have gone outside? I went to the door. "Chell." I heard Will call to me from the bar, but I continued outside into the street. It was dark, cold, and there was nobody around, save for a young couple further down the street. "Chell, you all right?" Will had followed me outside. I saw her again, I explained. "Who?" he asked. "The little girl. She was right there in the pub. I'm sure I saw her." "Well, she's not here now, love. Come on. Why don't we go back and get a drink and then head back?" I could tell he was totally bewildered and didn't know how to deal with this. "Can we just go back now, please. It's getting late anyway. I fancy an earlier night. I'm shattered. Once back at the cottage and in bed, I made him lock up while I went and got tucked in. This time I laid there for a long while after he had started snoring. I couldn't get the little girl's face out of my head, standing there looking so forlorn. I checked the time and it read to 34, so I closed my eyes for what felt like the 1000th time and attempted some sleep. The dream that ensued played out so vividly and real in my mind. Once again, I saw the woman and the little girl skipping down the street. "Look how fast I can run, ma'am," shouted the little girl as she started to make her way off down the street. "Don't go too far ahead, Emily. It's starting to get dark and Mad Maggie might catch you," shouted her mother. They got to the turn at the bottom of the churchyard steps and entered a small house with a big wooden door. The door was heavy and made a creak as the mother opened it to let the girl in, and then closed it behind them both. They entered the living area, and in there stood a man, who at first had his back to the pair, stoking the roaring fireplace. Hearing the heavy door shut, he turned to face them. His speech slurred, and it was clear he was very drunk and very angry. "Where ave you both been? Where the flamin' Elsme tea?" he barked, his skull blackened as he brandished the fire poker. "We were just out for a stroll in the evening air. I thought nowt bad of it, love. I expected as much that you'd be home later than this so I could have had your tea ready," offered the mother. She was shaking. "What is it to you what time I should be home? You should have my tea ready. I lost a bit of money playing cards, which is why I'm home early. Do you think if I had more money I'd come back to see you, useless bitch?" It was at that moment that little Emily plucked up some courage. "Don't you talk to my mummy like that. Shut up, you," he spat. At that moment he swung the fire poker. It connected with the side of Emily's head. She fell to the floor and lay there lifeless. The mother screamed in horror and swooped to the floor to help her daughter. Sadly, it was futile. She knelt there cradling Emily, crying. "Stop crying, stop crying," he shouted as he lunged forward, wrapping his weathered hands well around her neck. The sinewy tendons in his hands seemed to twist and creak like ropes. She choked and struggled a while, but was no match for his strength. She eventually slumped. He waited till nightfall, and when he had sobered up, he carried their bodies under the cover of darkness, one at a time, back up the cobbled street, past the steps at the bottom of the churchyard, past the old smokehouse, and up towards the face of the cliff. He decided that if he were to cast their bodies into the waters of the harbor, the authorities would surely find the bodies soon enough when they washed up on the shore. He decided to dig into the side of the cliff, the crashing waves masking the sound. The full moon cast a ghostly horror over the macabre scene. The mother and daughter were covered up in an undignified tomb of soil and rocks. "Please help us." I awoke with jolt. I knew now what I had to do, how I could help them. I carefully and silently slipped out of bed and got dressed. I crept downstairs and into the kitchen, where I knew I had seen a shovel in the cleaning cupboard and a battery-powered lantern that was in the overhead cupboard with the fuse box. I crept back upstairs to the living room, where to one side of the cottage there were patio doors which led out onto a seating area and small garden which faced the cliff. The back of the garden was surrounded with a fence which wasn't very high, and I managed to get over it with relative ease. I stood on the other side of the fence and faced the cliff, which towered above me How could I have known where to dig? The spot I started on just felt right. I felt so irresponsible in the back of my mind for digging into the weathered cliffs. But I couldn't stop. I began cutting into the hard earth with the shovel, hitting rock after rock. My hands and arms ached so bad after an hour, but I just couldn't stop. Not now. Then, suddenly, something caught my eye in a shovel full of soil. I sifted through the damp, heavy material and found a ring. It looked like a beautiful wedding ring. I must be close, I thought, and continued the rest of the excavation with my hands on my knees. My own death seemed inevitable as I groveled back into the hole, which was easily over a meter deep. I soon came across something hard and light-colored protruding from the earth. It was a small human skull, with a large crack on the right-hand side of it. Digging further, I uncovered larger bones and a matching skull. I had found them. Maybe now they could find peace in death and be granted a proper burial. I clambered back to my feet, and brushing the muddy earth away from my clothes, something caught my eye down onto the old cobbled street. Emily and her mother were there. They both seemed to glow and appeared so radiant and happy, as though they were superimposed upon the orange-lit street. They both smiled at me, waving. "Thank you," shouted Emily, her voice clear now and filled with joy, as a child's voice should be. They both turned and moved off down the street. Emily was skipping all the while as they faded away. Story 3. Under the ice, 6:52 a.m. Another nightmare. I wake up in a pool of my own sweat. My heart is pounding and my brain feels like it's going to break through my skull. Through the window, the sun has just begun to rise, banishing the demons and the darkness of night back to hell where they belong. The light shines through the blinds and covers my room in cage-like shadows. I sit up, pick my watch up off of my nightstand and slide it on my wrist. I pull my rifle out from under the bed, knocking over a newly emptied whiskey bottle. That explains the headache. I reach for the bottle and toss it into the waste basket. Whatever I had done last night is completely forgotten now. I grab a rag and polish the barrel until I can see a blurred reflection of myself looking back at me. I count each counterclockwise rotation. It's monotonous, but it calms my nerves. It is all part of my routine. My routine keeps me alive. My routine keeps me sane. I lay my gun to the side and look out the window at the sun as it crawls over the mountain peaks that line the sky like jagged teeth. It is a nice morning, yet I wish I could fully appreciate it. I can't seem to distract myself from my dream. People used to tell me they have a hard time remembering their dreams, but not me. My dreams stay burned into my brain like a brand, replaying themselves whenever I have a moment of peace. It was dark. I was hiding from what I don't know, but I knew it was there. I could smell its foul, festering stench. I could hear its heavy, shuffled footsteps. I closed my eyes in the vague hopes that it would somehow shelter me. I could hear the footsteps slide closer and closer until I couldn't hear them anymore. Thinking the worst was over, I opened my eyes. In front of me there was a figure, a woman. Her thin face is shrouded with long, dripping wet hair. I cannot see her eyes, but I know she can see me. Then I woke up. I can't remember the last time I had a pleasant dream. Hell, I don't think I've ever had a pleasant dream. As a boy I was plagued by night terrors. I'd wake up in the night screaming. My mother would come running in to calm me down. She'd hold me and tell me to focus on the sound of her voice. She told me to think happy thoughts, and I'd never have one again. It never worked. Happy thoughts don't come easy to me, so the nightmares always stayed. But who's to say that's a bad thing? I've never understood why people insist on having sweet dreams. It sets expectations too high for life. Nightmares keep you grounded. They keep things in perspective. Life can seem to be terrible, but the horrors it holds for you will never quite be as bad as what your subconscious can create while you sleep. At least that's what I tell myself. 8:28 a.m. I make myself a quick breakfast, the last of the rabbit. A measly portion like this isn't enough to last me until tomorrow. I'll have to catch another if I want dinner tonight. I look down at my watch again and attempt time out a schedule for the day. If I head out now, I can still have time to chop wood before the sun goes down. Between keeping warm last night and making breakfast, I only left myself half a log and a few twigs for kindling. If there was anything worse than a cold night up in these mountains, it was a cold night in the dark. The mind begins to wander when left alone in the dark. It fills the blackness with anything it can muster. Oftentimes it shows you the last thing you want to see. I put on my coat, grab my rifle, and make my way towards the door. As it creaks open, it fills the house with the frigid winter air. The chill immediately stabs at my face. I'll definitely have to make this hunting trip quick if I don't want to freeze to death tonight. My old tracks create a path in the snow from my last venture into the woods. I follow them, matching my boot into each corresponding footprint. Each step crunches the snow and sends echoes ringing through the silence around me. The forest cages the small clearing that houses my cabin. The towering pines stretch for miles. Beyond them, the mountains climb high into the sky. Beyond them, I don't know. I don't care to know. This vast tundra of frozen ground is my home, my kingdom, my wasteland. I keep away from the outside world, and it keeps away from me. It is an unspoken bond that has served me well these past 3 years. I loathe the world I left behind. Day in and day out, I found myself surrounded by people I could not stand to be around. It was all too much for me. I don't remember exactly when I realized I couldn't take it anymore. But one day I knew I had to get away while I could, while I still had an ounce of sanity left within me. I severed almost all ties I had to that life. Anyone worth knowing was gone, and I had no interest in meeting anyone new. The only contact I still have is an old friend, Harry, who's a trucker. Once a month, his route takes him to a dirt road about 5 miles away from my cabin. He keeps me supplied with my bare essentials and anything I might need or want. I never ask for much. Some canned food, booze, hunting supplies, a few books, and fresh water. I haven't actually seen him since he first brought me up here 2 years ago. He leaves the cargo for me, I fetch it and bring it here. Easy as that. Every now and then he'll leave a note for me. But all they do is sit in crumpled balls under my bed. I've never bothered reading one. 12:31 p.m. I look from my watch up at the sun shining through the tree's canopy. I have been on this little shit's trail for 3 hours, endlessly following him through this labyrinth of trees. Any time I get a clear shot, the bastard scurries off. I followed him to the edge of a pond within the forest. I squat behind a fallen tree and rest my elbows on its cold, frozen bark, waiting for him to stop moving for a second so I can get him in my sights. I've been here for a while now, but that's what hunting takes. Patience. A hell of a lot of patience. but I am used to this. When you live a life like I do, patience is a big part of your day. Maybe tomorrow I'll take a walk down to Harry's route and leave him a list for parts so I can build a few traps. It would make getting food a lot easier. I could use the spare time to engage myself in other ways. I never did mind hunting, though. There's a certain satisfaction in feasting on a meal you killed yourself. The thought of it makes my stomach rumble with hunger. At last he quits moving. I align his small, furry body with the crosshairs when something in my peripheral catches my eye. Beneath the ice of the frozen pond, I see a blurred shadow slowly moving about. I've tried fishing in that pond enough times to know that there is nothing living in there. So what is that? It can't be a log. It's moving around too much. Whatever is under there has to be alive. My eyes dart back to the crosshairs for a second. The rabbit is gone. I let myself get distracted, and now it's run off. I punch the overturned tree, splitting the skin on my knuckles a bit. No, I can't let this work myself up too much. I have a hard time bringing myself down after I work myself up. If I let myself get angry, I'll never be able to focus hard enough to catch this little shit. I hid closer to the edge of the pond to where he was standing, look for a trace of tracks to point which direction he went. The shadow under the ice moves again. I can see it more clearly now. It is a large silhouette eerily swaying beneath the ice. I lay down my rifle and inch closer to the back of the pond. The shape looks almost human. I look across the ice's surface. There is no break or crack to be seen. Nothing could have fallen in and still be alive. I put a bit of my weight on the ice. It's solid. It should be stable enough for me to walk on. Step by step, I carefully make my way to the shadow as it carries on its ghoulish dance. I loom over it and can see through the frosted layer between us that it is certainly human. This is impossible. How did they get down there? How are they still alive? I bend down to my knees and wipe away the layer of snow atop the ice. A hand is pressed against the other side. It is a thin, dainty hand, a woman's. Wrapped around her pale ring finger is a gold wedding band. I press my hand against the ice to match hers. I have to find a way to get her out. I survey the area to see if there is a nearby rock or branch I can use to break the ice. I shift my weight to stand up. In an instant, the ice shatters beneath my feet and sends me plummeting into the sub-zero temperatures below its surface. The water so cold it burns my skin with its touch. My entire body momentarily shuts down as I sink further down. As soon as my head is submerged, I am suddenly jolted back into consciousness. My arms flail desperately, trying to find the edge of the ice to pull myself back up. My thoughts are rapid and incomprehensible. Somehow I am able to find the edge. I grip it hard and pull my torso onto the ice's surface. I put my weight onto my elbows and force myself completely out of the water. The frigid air feels like summer compared to the depths I just crawled from. My body lies limp, staring into the sky as I try to catch my breath. My head is still spinning as if it hasn't caught up to my body yet and is still drowning in those freezing waters. The woman. What happened to her in all that commotion? I turn over and look into the hole. She is gone. Great. This is exactly what I need. No food and a vanishing woman. I stand myself up and carefully shuffle myself back to land. I can immediately feel the difference of solid ground under my feet through my soaking boots. I have to get out of these clothes unless I want to get hypothermia. I almost did when I first moved up here, and it is not an experience I want to live through again. I grabbed my rifle and began to follow my footprints back home. That fucking rabbit. I hate it for bringing me here. Tomorrow I'll gut that little shit and have the most satisfying meal of my lifetime. As I make my way through the trees, I can't help but think of the woman. I tell myself that my hunger and frustration must have gotten the better of me, made me see things that weren't there, but something about her gave me a strange feeling of déjà vu. That pale, ringed hand seemed so strange yet so familiar. For 15 p.m. somehow I make it home. I don't know how I did it. About halfway there the cold began to set in and I contemplated stopping. I wanted to just lay down in the snow and let the cold consume me. But something about dying then and there seemed weak, like I was giving up. I didn't want to go out like that. For a while, death is such a foreign concept to us. It's something we hear about, maybe imagine, but it's all a fantasy. Something that is so far out of reach, it could never happen to you, then suddenly is there. It comes in like an unwanted visitor that refuses to leave. It buries itself deep under your skin. You can't see it, but you know it's there. For the rest of your life, however short or long it may be, it patiently waits there until it can claim you and attach itself to the next poor soul. I slide my gun back under my bed and lay my soaked clothes next to the furnace. It's still burning the last bit of leftover wood from last night. It's not giving off much heat anymore, but they'll dry in time. I sit by the warm glow and try to get some color back in me. The warmth slowly begins to thaw me. At first, the sharp contrast in temperature hurts my skin, but I welcome it. In the cold, I had become numb to all sensation. It's good to feel again. Once I'm practically dry, I put on a new outfit and head back outside to chop wood. I look up at the sky. I have about an hour or two before I lose the sun. I walk out the door and head to the other side of the cabin. I remove the large nylon tarp from the wood pile and pick up my axe. Although chopping wood is a chore, it's one I sometimes enjoy. When I build up frustration after a bad day, I need an outlet to get it all out. And I've had a hell of a day. The wooden handle feels good in my grip. I hold on tight and bring the sharp metal blade high over my head. With everything I have, I hurl it down into the log at my feet. In one clean motion, the log splits in two, so satisfying. 6:02 p.m. whiskey warms my entire body in a way only alcohol can do. The sun is gone, but my house is filled with a light orange glow. Within the furnace, bright flames lick and crawl over the logs, letting out a hiss as they take over their new victim. The flames feed, growing ever stronger as the wood grows weaker. Eventually the ambush will end. All they will leave behind is a dead, black husk of what existed before. The flames will jump and dance at the defeat of their prey, but in their celebration, they will grow ignorant and forget what had given them their power. They will attempt to maintain themselves on whatever they have left over, but they were greedy and left no spare traces. Their inevitable defeat is brought upon by their own victory, but it is not all for nothing. Amongst his dying brothers, an ember will always hang on to life. He will be taken away by the wind to a new and strange place, but in his confusion, he will find new victims to prey upon. Once again, he will grow strong. I take back a swig of whiskey and laugh at the idea of the never-ending cycle. I usually try to save my alcohol for a celebration when I can properly enjoy it with a good meal. But I've had a long day, and no longer give a shit. I fill my mouth with the amber liquid and swallow. It burns like hell going down, but settles nicely in my stomach. It's late. Most of the bottle is empty. I probably should have stopped a while ago, but I didn't care. I deserve to treat myself after what I've been through today. It's safe to say that I am hammered. I remember when I used to get drunk like this in the city. After a long work week, Saturday nights were usually spent with my face down against a cold bar with an empty glass in my hand and an open tab. The bars were loud and the people were annoying, but I was always able to get drunk enough to down them out. Somehow I'd make it home and in bed, usually making a mess and trashing the house in the process. The floor beneath my ass grows harder and more uncomfortable. I grab a table ledge and pull myself to my feet. The room moves uncontrollably as I make my way into the kitchen. I punch the wall to tell it to stop, but it doesn't listen. I need to take it easy or I'm going to be sick. I slump over the sink and turn the water on. The cool water pours over my hands and settles me. I splash some in my face and look out the window. Why did I come out here alone? If only ever needed myself. But sometimes I do get a little lonely. The clouds fully engulf the moon, making my cabin the only source of light. I focus into the darkness and am filled with a sense of dread. Something's out there. At first I think I'm seeing things, but then I see it again, slowly moving toward the cabin. I press my nose against the glass. I tell myself that it's probably just a vol for a deer, but the shape is human. A woman now stands just outside the cabin. Her hair is long and hangs in her face. She's wearing a long, white nightgown. She is soaking wet. She is the woman from the ice. She does not move. She just stands there, looking down at her feet. My eyes are drawn to her left hand. I can't get the image of it pressed against the ice out of my head. That pale, thin hand with the gold wedding band. I look back to her face. She is now looking directly at me. Her gaze pierces through her dripping hair and locks onto me. I have never felt such an uneasy feeling in my life. I am sick to my stomach now. I flail my arms, gesturing for her to look away or hopefully just leave. But she stays where she is, fixated on me. I can't take this anymore. I turn away from her and run from my kitchen, through my living room, and into my bedroom. I just need some sleep. Tomorrow all of this will go away and I can get back into the swing of things. My head is reeling. The room continues to move around me. I look down at my bed, but I can't bring it into focus. I lean forward and reach for it, but miss and fall to the floor. I fail to brace myself, and my head thumps against the floor. The pain shoots through me as I lay there. I groan and open my eyes. Under the bed lay several of the crumpled up notes from Harry. The haze of my fall begins to clear, and I make out the words police and suspicious written on one. What the hell? I grab the paper and unfold it. The words spin around the page as I try to read them. I rub my eyes and try to focus. Hope you're doing okay. The police questioned me and were suspicious for a while, but I think we're in the clear now. You don't have to worry about them finding you up there. Hope these supplies last you until next month. Keep in touch, Harry, police. What the hell is this all about? I open another note. Was hoping you'd have gotten back to me. Are you doing okay? I'm getting worried about you. After what happened, I hope you're keeping yourself together up there. Harry, my head is going a mile a minute. What is he talking about? After what happened, why should he be worried? What is going on? I grab another and quickly unfold it. Really wish you'd get back to me. I don't know what you're doing with yourself all alone up there. I could give you some company when I come by if you need. I just worrying what you might be doing to yourself. I'm sorry to bring this up and be so blunt, but a guy doesn't just drown his wife and walk away like nothing happened. Really, you can talk to me about it. Please let me know how you're doing. Harry, what is he getting at? He has to be fucking with me. I tossed the papers back under the bed. I was never married, and I sure as hell have never killed anyone. I'm not hiding from anyone. I'm here because I want to be. I need the isolation. Don't I? I'm so confused. I've been through too much tonight. I can't take this right now. I look down at my hands. My fingers are feverishly shaking. I bring myself to my knees. I couldn't kill anyone. Could I? I look at my left hand. What is wrong with me? How did I never notice this? A faded ring of pale white skin wraps the base of my ring finger. I feel like I was beaten over the head. My thoughts scramble and slowly come together. Samantha, I had another day of my boss chewing me out at work. I came home agitated, on edge, and roaring drunk. I just wanted to be left alone to drink, and she knew that. But she yelled. She yelled at me for coming home drunk every other night. We fought. We screamed. We threw things at each other. Eventually she said she was done with me and went into the bathroom to start a bath to calm herself down. But I wasn't calm. I needed to tell her exactly what I thought about her and her shit. How could she just walk away like that? Like nothing happened, like we never loved each other, like I wasn't worth her time. Then she started humming. That hum that got under my skin. I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take her anymore. I bury my face in my hands. My tears run down my palms and fall to the floor. I can hear footsteps coming in through the living room. It's her. Why can't she just leave me alone? Why can't she just let me be? I just want to be left alone. The fire has begun to die down. The light doesn't reach my room anymore. I sit in the dark on my bedroom floor. I can hear her footsteps getting closer. She begins to hum. I can't take this. I crawl to the corner of the room next to my dresser. Just leave me alone, please. Her footsteps grow closer and closer. My toes curl and my heart races. I shut my eyes. Just go away. Please go away. You're not real. You're dead. I killed you. I fucking killed you. Just go. Let me live. Let me forget. It is quiet. Is she gone? I open my eyes. She is inches away from my face. I try to scream, but I can't. Her long, brown hair hangs over her face, dripping on the floor between us. Her eyes look deep within me. I begin to get lightheaded. My eyes grow heavy and I fall to the floor. Everything flies by me except her. She stays in focus, fixated on me. Then everything is black. 6:52 a.m. Another nightmare. I wake up in a pool of my own sweat. My heart is pounding and my head feels like it's going to break through my skull. Through the window, the sun has just begun to rise, banishing the demons and the darkness of night back to hell. I sit up and pull my rifle out from under the bed, knocking over a newly emptied whiskey bottle. That explains the headache. I reach for the bottle and toss it in the waste basket. It clinks against the other bottles. Whatever I had done last night is completely forgotten now. I grab a rag and polish the barrel until I can see a blurred reflection of myself looking back at me. I count each counterclockwise rotation. It's monotonous, but it calms my nerves. It is all part of my routine. My routine keeps me alive. My routine keeps me sane.